Hey again guys, how's it going? This is going to be another video that I'm doing on my phone, so the actual video quality might not be great, but hopefully you kind of get the use out of the information anyway. Yeah, so the inside screen for my Galaxy Fold has broken. There is a small fracture down the middle. I don't know if any of you guys have got a Galaxy Fold and you've had this same problem, but I got a very small fracture underneath the screen, so I assume it's something that's happened underneath the screen, and now the entire touchscreen just doesn't work, or if it does, it doesn't register the touches properly, so I can't actually use my big screen to record any content. So Samsung, or if anyone knows anyone at Samsung, you're listening and you want to sponsor me with the new Galaxy, that would be great. Anyway, let's just get into the video. I'm going to show you, unfortunately, slightly smaller gameplay this time round because it's only recorded on the front screen of my Galaxy Fold, but the deck will be there the whole time, so you guys can see the deck that I use for a non-talented and a talented version of red level dungeon runs, this time using old Murk-Eye. I think this is the perfect deck, by the way. Don't think you can get much better than this deck because it's got the tools that you need to beat pretty much everything in the dungeons. So I'm going to show you guys that I didn't really run into much trouble with no talents or with talents, so hopefully it'll be good for you. Okay, so kicking things off, we're going to take Leeching Poison for this dungeon run as our first relic. It's incredibly good with Quillbore, Flame Elemental, and also Prowler. They all get massive value out of Leeching Poison. So, first thing you're going to want to know about Krieg is his unique mechanic. He spawns Ogre Magi in pairs, and also forces any minis that go below a certain health threshold go into Bloodlust. Now, what I'm going to do in this opening sequence is you're going to see me use Execute to force that Mountaineer to go into Bloodlust around the tower, which deals a lot of damage to the tower and takes it for us. We are then going to use Prowler to try and get the Frostwolf Grunts to go into Bloodlust and also deal with the Troll Headhunter. You really do want to try and get both of those initial packs into Bloodlust as soon as possible, because that basically is the hardest part of this level. Once you've taken down that initial pack and you've secured yourself the first tower, you want to go about trying to take the second tower, and that essentially will set you up for success from this point onwards. What you're going to see me do a lot of in this game is use Execute on big packs of minis around Krieg. The reason we do this is that we want to force minis into Bloodlust where they attack anything near Krieg, because not only does that mean Krieg will then start to attack them himself, it also means that those minis will then start to attack Krieg, which means that we deal a significant amount of damage to Krieg from the enemy minis themselves. So you're going to see me try and do that frequently. If you don't have Execute, the next best thing is using a safe pilot, which is why we include her in the deck, because you might not have Execute up all the time. So you're going to see me here use a safe pilot and just try and get some damage down on these Frostwolf Grunts. Not enough, but enough to distract them so that we get an Execute coming back down, and that then sends a Mountaineer, a Ogre Mage, and a double Frostwolf Grunts into a complete frenzy. And you can see, just with the right timing, how much damage we've been able to do to Krieg off the back of a single push with Execute there. You can see old Murk-Eye actually is... Old Murk-Eye is deceptive, actually. Old Murk-Eye can do a lot of damage if you leave him to his own devices. And we have basically beaten Krieg off one push there, because a good Execute around Krieg will end up getting the job done. You can see here I was trying to get the job done with a safe pilot. Not enough, but I can finish him off with an Execute of my own. And that is a very, very simple way to deal with Krieg, and you can see the value of certain minis. Actually, the least valuable mini that we had here really was Harpies, because there are so many Huntresses and Ogre Magi that it's very difficult to get value out of Harpies, but Harpies will come into big value, sometimes on the second boss, but also especially on the last boss. You really need that DPS on the last boss, and the Harpies provide a significant boost to DPS. We're going to jump into Imulthar now, and the tactic for Imulthar is actually quite straightforward because we have Flame Elemental. We couldn't run Flame Elemental in the Hogger deck because there isn't a slot for it. You can't get a tank slot or an Elemental slot, I don't think, in the Hogger deck. If you can, then I'm an idiot. But either way, if you can run Flame Elemental in this, like effectively run Flame Elemental in this dungeon, then it just becomes very, very easy to find success. Now, we are going to use old Murk-Eye pretty early on here. What you're going to notice me do is capture that Meeting Stone. You want to capture that Meeting Stone because that's essentially where you want to launch your attacks of Flame Elementals. Now, I'm not going to be able to get Flame Elemental. Oh, I will. I actually managed to drop Flame Elemental there now. The other nice thing about Flame Elemental is that with Leeching Poison, it can essentially tank for days. Leeching Poison, like I said, is a really, really powerful tool for Flame Elemental on this particular map. We're going to use Prowlers to contest the enemy Prowlers, and then we're going to use them to also try and contest the Ogre Magi. That's why we use Prowler. It's just very good at dealing with these annoying 5-cost units and other annoying units that generally prove a bit more of a nuisance on this map. The other thing that we can do here, if we don't have a Flame Elemental to tank Imulthar, the next best thing, and this is why we include Harpies, the next best thing is that we can drop a Quillbore to turn Imulthar away and then drop Harpies. But all I'm going to do for the time being is continue to just spawn Flame Elementals, because they will just continuously tank Imulthar. Obviously, you can see that he dropped a Prowler. It's probably the best answer that this guy's got. Maybe Huntress is also very good, but you know, those units are kind of the only answers, apart from maybe also Banshee, I suppose. You do have to be a little aware of Banshees. I've actually never seen him use a Banshee in response to a Fire Elemental that I've dropped near Imulthar. Generally tends to not happen that way. You kind of usually see Banshees spawned randomly, and then you just kind of have to deal with them that way. But as you can see, I'm just looking for another opportunity to push on to Imulthar. We can do it either with Harpies, but we can also do it with our Flame Elemental, which we're going to do here. And you're going to notice that in the run that I use with Talents, we actually do go for a Harpies play, because the Harpies DPS is just very, very high. So there are two main strategies for Imulthar. One of them is quite straightforward. You just send Flame Elementals from that meeting point over and over again towards Imulthar, and they'll eventually work him down. The second is that you can go for that side tower. Now, you really have to go for it when the opportunity presents itself, and this is where Execute comes into use on this map. You wouldn't actually use Execute on Imulthar because it's a bit of a waste most of the time. So you really want to use Execute kind of either in the dying ends of Imulthar, but otherwise it's really used for securing that tower on the right-hand side. That tower to me is a luxury. You'll notice that in the talent run I don't actually go for it at all. It's just because finding the right timing and like hoping for that the boss isn't going to spawn a load of really, really annoying minis right on top of your head is a bit of a pain in the ass. So frankly, we only go for that side tower if the right opportunity presents itself. But it is a viable strategy for Imulthar, especially at the lower levels. I find that the higher level you go, the less likely it is for that strategy to work, and the more likely it is just to send Flame Elementals at his face. And you're going to notice that in the next level that I do a level 28 dungeon with just basically ignoring the side tower. So again, we've taken him down to pretty low HP here. We are just looking for the right opportunity to go and put more pressure on. Again, we're going to ensuring that we're securing that meeting stone. Now, what you've noticed here is I've actually dropped Harpies. I've dropped them quite far back, but I've also dropped the Prowler. Don't even need the Harpies in this case. Prowler is very high DPS. We turned him with Quillbore, and we ended up getting the win, so that was actually relatively easy. Alright, and that takes us to the final boss on this no talent run. Have a quick look at the talents that we get offered. I can't quite remember what we got offered here. We had Dark Moon Prize Wheel, which is rubbish most of the time, Necrology Robes, and Anointed Pickaxe. I actually went for, these are all pretty terrible, and so we've actually gone for Anointed Pickaxe here. Mostly because it does synergize quite well with Leeching Poison, and also because there is a lot of gold to mine on the final boss. So that's where Anointed Pickaxe actually comes in quite useful. It's actually very rarely useful in dungeons, but this boss, there are a lot of gold mines, and you can generally get a lot of gold secured quite easily. So with this boss, yeah, a lot of it comes down to luck of mini spawns, I found, because the ultimate aim, the best way to beat this boss is to get the side lieutenants to attack the boss at the same time. The most important side lieutenant is the Blood Elf lieutenant on the right, because she applies the weakness debuff that causes his attack speed to slow down to absolutely nothing. The problem is she takes a lot. I often find that she takes a lot longer to get to the boss than our Ogre Lieutenant on the left-hand side. Now, the Ogre Lieutenant applies Mortal Wound, which reduces healing effectiveness on the boss. That actually doesn't matter. And I'll tell you why it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because our strategy revolves around... So our strategy revolves around using Execute to take down the healer. And most of my successful runs, you don't need to take down the healer, but most of my successful runs have been around taking down the healer. What I often find, especially at the higher levels, is I have one coordinated push that takes out the healer,
and then I have to regroup, take down the lieutenants again, and then essentially go for the boss in terms of chipping damage over time. Because one of the benefits of when you take down the healer is that any damage that you deal to the boss after that is permanent. So you can kind of get away with then chipping damage away and kind of making it work that way. But it's a little more tricky to take out the healer than you'd think. The reason being is that you need to keep the boss and the healer engaged in combat. If you don't keep the boss and the healer engaged in combat, then unfortunately what ends up happening is the healer just ends up healing himself, so that you kind of waste the execute damage that you've dealt to him. One of the good ways to do that is to spawn a Quillbore behind the healer, primarily because the Quillbore can tank it for ages, but also it will just mean that you get a few extra moments of combat, which can be very useful. Especially because we're running quite an expensive old Murk-Eye deck, so cycling back to execute can be a bit of a big deal, but otherwise it's not too much of a problem. You've just seen that I've dropped a Quillbot and a safe pilot on the back there. And this is a good way also, if you don't have an execute, you can just like guarantee the damage by dropping safe pilot, dropping Quillbot, and just ensuring that you're able to keep that healer in combat. You can see I didn't actually even need to use my second execute there. The double Quillbot and the safe pilot were able to deal the damage necessary. But as you can see, we are going to have to regroup and go again, because the boss has now taken down one of my side lieutenants, and now the Blood Elf lieutenant has also been killed. So that's essentially resulted in me having to like reset and find the right opportunity to go again. But we have the time to do so, we have the space to do so, and as I mentioned, any damage to the boss will now be permanent, which is great. But yeah, we just have to look for a good opportunity to go for the boss once more. And unfortunately, I haven't really set up very well here. The reason being is that I've killed the Ogre Lieutenant because he's annoyingly easy to kill, but I haven't actually killed the Blood Elf Lieutenant, and she's ended up walking all the way back towards my base. She's annoyingly slow, she's very difficult to kill, and she also generally has to deal with the most spawns. For some reason, she has to deal with the most spawns. So I'm kind of like balancing the Ogre Lieutenant in the middle of the map. He's going to get back to the boss very quickly. His use at this point is only to be an extra tank, so we don't really actually need him to get the win. He's primarily there just to be an extra tank for us. He can kind of help us out in those last moments, but we really do need to get the Blood Elf lady back over to the boss. Now you can see that I'm spawning a Quillbore. And one of the things that actually you want to do when you're going for a big pusher is you kind of want to save up for a big old Murk-Eye push, because that basically allows you to spawn an absolute boatload of DPS. And they on this map, for some reason, they all spawn down the middle, so you can guarantee a huge collection of Murlocs. And I can use the execute there as well, and we end up just getting a huge amount of DPS. And even though Blood Elf Lady turned up a little later, we do actually get the debuff, and that ends up securing us the win pretty easily. And we can see we have a huge amount of old Murk-Eyes and Murlocs going for it. And that will give us our level 27 dungeon clear with 0 talents. This is a red level dungeon, and that's really, really awesome. So very happy about that. And now we can go on to the level 28 dungeon clear with talents. Both very tough dungeon clears to do, but nonetheless, pretty happy that we managed to make it work for us. I just wanted to show you guys that I didn't actually show me going into the dungeon, so I want to show you guys that this was the deck that I was using before we jump into the talented version. And actually, the good thing about this video is when we jump into the talented version, you're going to see me running exactly the same deck. Now, actually, I'm showing you a screenshot of using the Prowler Stealth talent. I actually changed that out, as you can see here, to Predatory Instincts to increase the damage of beasts near the Prowler, which is actually just really good for old Murk-Eye because all of the Murlocs count as beasts. And the other reason I did that is because, I don't know if you guys know this, and I actually learnt this from an old Guardian video. If you change a mini that has a relic attached to it, like a stealth mini, and you get Shadow Blade, I changed Prowler from his stealth mini, and it re-rolled the relics that I had to Light Feather, which is actually, Light Feather is incredibly good for Harpies. So I took Light Feather because it means that my Harpies are now going to have an extra shield versus things like the Ogre Magi and the Huntress, and it just provides that extra element here. Now I'm going to spawn a Flame Elemental right next to this chest, hopefully take it very quickly. We're going to immediately execute, like I did on the previous run. We're going to drop a safe pilot on top of these guys with Coming in Hot, which will allow us to get the burn damage, and that then ascends them into a frenzy very, very quickly. And we have our Flame Elemental now also going towards this tower, which will take it pretty quickly too. We'll drop a Prowler because we do not want that massively enraged Warsong Grunt to like wail on our tower, because we'll end up losing a huge amount of resource. And we're also going to go for kind of a, I would say, a very mediocre old Murk-Eye, but it's okay because it's primarily there to just support our harpies and try and stop that mountaineer from going crazy. At the same time, we also take down this side tower, which is the most important thing, and we're going to use an execute on those Warsong grunts just to kind of take them away from our base. It was pretty important that we did that because we have obviously got that Huntress who is dealt like 2/3 of our base HP, so we took a very heavy damage on that first push. But now we've secured this side tower, we are in that stage of the game where we can just start again using Safe Pilot and using execute to our advantage to just try and force the enemy minis onto Krieg, and that's kind of what we've done here. It is harder. We are now going like level 26 minis into level 28 dungeons, so it's a little more tough to make this work, but with the talents it kind of helps you get there. And obviously, like I said, Light Feather is very, very powerful for this too. Your prime opportunity is really looking for Warsong grunts. That was actually a really terrible execute on my part, by the way. That was a real waste of resource, to be completely frank with you, but nonetheless, it's not the worst thing in the world. We're actually going to lose this tower as well. We didn't lose that tower. I thought we were going to lose that tower. We're going to use Prowler to deal with this Ogre Magi. It's a little bit more difficult now, even the levels. It means we do actually, our Prowlers unfortunately can't 1v1 the Ogre Magi anymore, but it makes it one hit from the tower, so that basically kind of nullifies the threat. And we're going to have to use old Murk-Eye once again. We are going to do it by spawning a Quillball behind the tower just to draw the aggro. This is why I really like running the Quillball. And then we use old Murk-Eye. Old Murk-Eye will actually instantly send the Huntress into Enrage, and then we're going to use Execute to send the Warsong Grunts into Enrage again. They're the best. Honestly, the Warsong Grunts are the best target for the Execute. It basically forces them to attack each other. You get a massive value trade in terms of gold spent, but you can see like we are running a little bit more ragged this time round in terms of like actually getting the towers. We're taking a couple of poor trades because obviously the higher levels you go, the less likely your minis are to trade effectively, and so you're really just looking for good opportunities to use that execute. And as you can see here, like I haven't got great execute opportunities yet because I really need to take that side tower, and that's kind of what I'm focused on in this point in time. We luckily don't have to use it on this set of Warsong grunts. They end up getting triggered anyway, and so we're able to take that side tower without actually expending 3 gold resource. We have to use a Safe Pilot to secure it because the Ogre Magi spawned just after, but that's perfectly fine. And now we have the chance to use execute on those Ogre Magi and also on Krieg, which we can now start that boss damage because it's a lot slower compared to the level 27 run. We haven't had as clean of a run at the boss themselves, and you can see like it's just a bit more, like I said, it's a bit more of a struggle in terms of the gold that we're spending. We're running a little lower. We can't make we're not able to get a huge kind of like old Murk-Eye push, and now we're into overtime. This is where it becomes a little easier because we're basically going to have execute much more frequently, which means we can kind of use execute on larger clumps of minis. But as I said, this is why we include Safe Pilot. Safe Pilot is a good backup for execute on this level, especially if you're running the coming in hot talent, because that essentially allows you to apply the burn, and that usually is enough to end up getting you over the line in terms of proccing the bloodlust of the minis around Krieg. But as you can see here, we get the harpies on him anyway, and the harpies poison damage do the rest of the work for us. Hopefully, I'm hoping this is helpful for you. Like, I'm just talking through the tactics for each of these bosses in terms of how I'm approaching them with the talents and without the talents. And you're going to see me run into Immolthar this time around. Now, we do not have Leeching Poison on this particular run, but obviously we do have the Immolate talent, which is going to deal consistent damage to Immolthar over time. So our Flame Elemental is going to tank for ages. We also have a really insane talent pick here, or relic pick here rather, sorry, and we have Protector's Band. Given that we run 3 tank type minis in this deck, which includes Prowler, Quillball, and Flame Elemental, that's an incredibly powerful tool. Not only is it going to allow us to cycle to execute quicker for the final boss, it just means that we can spam more Flame Elementals, we can get Quillball to tank with the Harpies a bit more often, etc. Now, you guys remember what I talked about in terms of tactics on this boss. Nothing is going to change. You'll probably notice that this time around I do not go. I think I don't go for the tower this time around because it's a little harder. Like I said, when your Prowler is losing 1v1 to Ogre Magi, it's a little more difficult to actually make this work. You'll also notice that Banshees don't get one shot by my Safe Pilot anymore. So there's a sort of more precarious trades to be taken on this particular version. Now, we're going to send our Flame Elemental up towards this tower. Obviously, I do not want my Flame Elemental to get Bansheed here. We kind of want it to go over to one of my Harpies, and that is essentially what happens. Luckily, old Murk-Eye is pretty good into Banshee. You usually can put something low value in the way of it, so we ended up getting one of our mini Murlocs taken. But our primary goal of just having Flame Elementals heading towards the boss is working out here, and we have that Meeting Stone captured, which is the most important thing. So now we're going to end up having Execute. Now actually is a little bit more useful to use in the boss because we have the Bloodlust talent, so we're using Execute here just to kind of get our Flame Elemental going, getting some more damage down. I'm going to re-secure that Meeting Stone because it is quite easy to lose that Meeting Stone, to be honest with you. But luckily, our Prowler able to deal 1v1 with the enemy Prowler because it had taken a bit of damage. We're going to kill off all of those Spiderlings before they get towards our Meeting Stone, and we are again going to send a random Flame Elemental towards them. We're going to keep doing this over and over again, but as you can see, you do lose that Meeting Stone pretty quickly because the enemy eyes also count as like enemy minis, and so they can then recapture that Meeting Stone for their team. We end up losing it again to this Prowler, which is not a problem. We're going to use the Harpies here. Now, the side tactic that we've got, we've already dealt half HP to the boss, by the way. This is the side tactic that we're going to use. We actually are very lucky because they spawn a Huntress in response to our Harpies, which is very regular, but we end up getting the Harpies to the boss with the Quillboar tanking, and it ends up killing it really quickly. So you have two tactics to deal with this boss, depending on which one works out for you, but the Flame Elementals did the bulk of the work there, and we used the Harpies to finish the job. And that was very quick, very easy, and we didn't even bother with the side tower on that time round. And now we're going to the final boss, and this is where things get a little tricky because, again, like I said, timing can be a little bit lucky. It depends on the minis that spawn. It's difficult to manipulate the RNG on this boss in your favor, because obviously, like the way it works in pretty much any PvE scenario, you can always alter the way that the computer responds by altering the plays that you make, depending on which lane you send a mini down. Like, they generally look to counter the type of mini that you've placed in a certain lane. You'll notice that happens all the time in this dungeon where they spawn a Huntress or an Ogre Magi directly where your Harpies are going, etc. That's just the way the game is set up. So you can kind of alter things to an extent. Like, I'm trying to do the Onyxia fight right now. You can alter a lot of RNG by playing your minis in a different way, or just like holding onto your gold or whatever. You can alter things slightly. But on this level, it's quite difficult because you're balancing so many sticks. Also, you're spinning so many plates, I would say. You're trying to get the lieutenants to turn up at the same time. You're trying to defend your base. You're trying to take that central tower so that you can launch attacks more easily when you do get those minis to line up. And then you have to deal with like the fact that you can't actually proactively or easily respond to minis that are spawned in the bosses, because you can't run a full unbound deck. You wouldn't get very far with it. So it's very difficult to kind of set up plays to predict what the opponent is doing, because you can't actually send anything at the enemies proactively. You kind of have to predict, and that's difficult when the enemy is set up to counter your plays. You can never really accurately predict what you're supposed to do. But nonetheless, we take that side lieutenant, we take that central tower. They're kind of turning up at the same time here. This is good for us, so we're going to go for a very big Murloc play here. Why are we doing it this way? We got a little bit stuck by the ghoul. This is the problem that I mean, right? That one ghoul, that one 2-cost mini, has now meant that my Silver Moon lieutenant has turned up a little bit late to the fight, and she has not cast her weakness spell. She ended up casting it on the wrong target anyway, which is awful. But we actually are going to use the Quillboar to keep this fight going, because we really do need to essentially make sure that we keep that lieutenant in the game. We're going to use a safe pilot here as well. We just basically need to get one more execute off here, and this is what I mean by using the safe pilot and using the Quillboar just to keep that healer in the fight. You want to keep him engaged. You need to keep him in combat. Otherwise, he'll end up healing himself, and your executes won't have been worth it. We luckily make it happen, and now we're going to restart our attempted take on these two particular lieutenants. Now, interestingly, you don't actually necessarily need the Silver Moon lieutenant or the Blood Elf lieutenant if you time things really well on the boss, because we have Harpies with poison. So if you time things well enough, Harpies with poison can stack a huge amount of damage on the boss, and because he no longer has a healer, it actually can be possible to beat this boss without having the attack speed debuff that the second lieutenant provides. I know I'm committing a lot of resources here. It's because I just don't want that lieutenant to end up killing our base. So we end up taking her down, but we can make a concerted push with old Murk-Eye, especially because we have the Prowler with 30% damage talent, but also more importantly, we have Harpies with poison, and we also have the Execute with Bloodlust. So what you're going to notice me do here is I'm going to make sure my Harpies are included in that Execute, and they are stacking up a boatload of damage. And despite his attack speed going through the roof, we have a huge amount of poison damage stacked on him. So we didn't even need the Silver Moon Lieutenant to actually end up winning this, because Harpies with poison are absolutely broken. And that is the end of both of our runs. We completed a level 27 and a level 28 dungeon with no talents and talents using exactly the same deck. Hopefully this helps you guys in terms of completing your own pushes this week. Old Murk-Eye is a great leader in both PvE and PvP, and we'll see you very soon.